Live from London, this is The World Today.
Hello, I'm Jamie Owen. Welcome to the programme. Our top stories. China's President Xi Jinping says cooperation between Beijing and Berlin is an opportunity and not a risk as he holds talks with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Our other headlines: Israel's war cabinet convenes for a third time to discuss its response to Iran's drone and missile attack. And Gaza's health officials say dozens of Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes in the last 24 hours. Cooperation between Beijing and Berlin is not a risk, but an opportunity. That's the message from China's President Xi Jinping as he held talks with Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz. This visit comes amid trade tension with the European Union as it investigates whether China is competing unfairly through the use of tariffs. Xi told Scholz that China and Germany should be vigilant against rising protectionism. Our correspondent Biran reports.
This morning, Chinese President Xi Jinping met with German Chancellor Scholz and Jiao Yutai in Beijing. The two discussed bilateral relations and issues of common concern. President Xi said both China and Germany had made great contribution to the human civilization. And he also said there was no fundamental conflict of interest between the two countries, and they do not pose security issues to each other. And also the cooperation, according to Xi, is beneficial to both sides and to the world. He also said the industrial chain and the supply chains between the two countries are highly integrated, and the market currently are deeply dependent on each other. So the mutually beneficial cooperation between the two sides is not a risk, but a guarantee for stability of the relations and the cooperation in the future.
中德是世界第二、第三大经济体。
As the world's second and third largest economies, China and Germany's relationship transcends the scope of bilateral relations. It has an important impact on the Asian and European continents and on the rest of the world. The two countries should develop their relations from a long-term and strategic perspective and should work together to inject more stability and certainty into the world.
Scholz said currently the cooperation and communication between the two countries developing well with cooperation in various fields at various levels. In the future, he said, Germany is willing to continue strengthening the relations and deepen dialogue and bilateral cooperation, as well as promoting the cultural and educational exchanges. And we know Scholz is leading on a delegation full of business representatives and policymakers this time. They're coming here to deepen the trade relations with China, as well as explore some new investment opportunities. So I believe in the future, the cooperation can be ranged from in the fields of innovation, green economy, manufacturing, of course, global R&D, and new energy vehicles.
Israel's war cabinet is meeting to discuss a response to Iran's retaliatory attack over the weekend. Tehran said it was responding to what it believes was an Israeli attack on its consulate in Syria, which killed 13 people. Israel is now calling on dozens of countries to place sanctions on the Iranian missile program. Let's talk to our correspondent, Alex Cadier, in Tel Aviv. Alex, so Israel's war cabinet meeting again today. What can we expect?
Jamie, you can expect quite a lot of tough talk about Israel having to respond, about ballistic missiles being fired at Israel being entirely unacceptable, and that Israel has a right to defend itself, and that there will be a response. We heard that from Herzl Halevi, the head of the Israeli Defense Forces. He said Israel will respond at a time and pace that is right for Israel. There will be a response. You have Gallant, the defense minister, telling Lloyd Austin in the US, his counterpart, Israel has no choice but to respond. The question will be what that response will look like, and that will be the crucial question as to exactly what Israel does. I think to manage our viewers' expectation a little bit, we most likely won't know what that response is until it's already happened. But that is the discussion that will be ongoing in that war cabinet. We know from previous war cabinets in the last 48 hours, the initial plan on Friday, before this enormous barrage of missiles flew towards Israel, was to respond immediately. Clearly, that has not happened. Then we heard that Benny Gantz, amongst others, more centrist, more moderate members of the war cabinet, previous opponents of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, had been pushing for an immediate military response. And the Prime Minister had been slightly pumping the brakes on that, listening to those allies, listening to the feedback from the United States, saying, do not escalate this any further. And that clearly, that message seems to have come through. We understand from US officials the diplomatic pressure by the United States and others may have convinced Israel to keep its powder dry for now, but there will be some kind of response. We'll have to wait a few hours to see exactly what that is.
Alex, Tel Aviv has vowed a response to Iran's attack. What sort of response might that be?
Yeah, that's the right question, Jamie, clearly. There will be a variety of options. The one that the world wants to avoid is certainly the international community, from the United States to China to Russia to South Africa to India. We've all heard them say, please do not escalate this any further. They do not want to see a direct military strike against Iran, because Iran has said they will respond within seconds and much stronger. That path leads possibly to war between two nuclear-capable countries in the Middle East. There are other options. We understand from US officials speaking to other media that the Israeli government is considering strikes against Iran's proxies, against Hezbollah. We've seen a field commander from Hezbollah in southern Lebanon killed in an Israeli airstrike just today. That seems the more likely option, but it's also important to point out there are other less lethal options: cyber attack and a big diplomatic push. The Foreign Minister of Israel leading what he called a diplomatic offensive against Iran. 32 letters to countries around the world trying to put pressure on Iran. They want to see the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, listed as a terrorist organization. So probably a multi-track approach from Israel. Maybe not the military retaliation everybody feared. Jamie.
Alex, thank you for that. Our correspondent Alex Cadier in Tel Aviv. Health officials in Gaza say at least 46 Palestinians have been killed and dozens more injured in Israeli strikes in the last 24 hours. Let's talk now to our correspondent Akram Al-Satari in the city of Rafah. Akram, fresh attacks across Gaza. What more do we know? What can you tell us?
Well, yes, indeed, the fresh attacks are covering almost all different parts and cities of the Gaza Strip, starting from the very north of the Gaza Strip, then the Gaza central area, where some very fierce ground operation is still starting, with fresh attacks against the people, against the houses, against the infrastructure, with the Israeli troops trying to advance into the North al-Nusayrat area in the hope that they can create a buffer zone that has been stated by their officials, and that they said that this process is continuous. Then more bombardment in Khan Yunis area, as well as more attempts to retrieve as much body as the civil defense and the police forces can collect. Also, there is a fresh strike in Ash-Shaja'iyya area that witnessed a widespread chaos, and there were some community committees that were formed, and also some civil police forces that are trying to secure the humanitarian aid convoys to reach the people in Gaza City and the Gaza North. Just a couple of hours ago, one of the convoys was targeted by the Israeli occupation forces. 8 policemen were killed and many more were injured. So the continuation of what is perceived as the third stage of the Israeli war against Gaza, where they have very focused operations, such as in Beit Hanun, where they entered the area and where they were trying to besiege one of the schools that were housing the internally displaced people. They're arresting people, they were searching the people, they were interrogating some of them, releasing some of them, asking them to leave the area of Beit Hanun and Jabalia, and they were arresting some others, while many others were killed. So it's a continuation, and it seems to be the stage 3 of the war on Gaza, where they have focused ground operations and aerial strikes to support those ground operations, but they don't have actual and permanent presence on the ground.
Akram, the ceasefire talks seem to have been overshadowed somewhat by the Israeli tensions with Iran. I mean, what's the feeling there in Gaza?
Well, in the very first night, the tension erupted between Iran and Israel, and with the drones and with the ballistic missiles, and also with the other type of ammunition that was used against Israel were reaching the boundaries of Israel. The unmanned drones that you hear now in the background that were hovering 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, were non-existent. They were not doing any kind of military activities. The tanks were not doing anything. The Israeli army at large, it seemed that the Israeli army was very busy. And the Palestinians also were welcoming that feeling of comfort, feeling that Israel is getting busy dealing with another major risk coming from the Iranian side. They have the feeling, most of the Palestinians have the feeling that Iran now is a very important player that is going to distract Israel and subside their military activity to avoid the Palestinians and prevent them from the discourages of war that have been going on for such a very long time. The Palestinians understand militarily they have been fought and they have been resisting for around 6 months now, but now they are seeing another player, another actor that is powerful and that is capable to reach the Israeli or the so-called Israeli territory, and that makes them feel comfortable, and they are still following up the news about any potential standoff between Iran and Israel, and they understand now the dynamics are changing, and they totally understand that there might be some larger scale tension that would make Israel busy and make Israel just totally distracted to avoid and divert the attention of the Israeli forces from the Gaza front to Iran front, which means Gazans would be spared a lot of the discourages that are already taking place.
Akram, thank you for that. Our correspondent Akram Al-Satari in Rafah. Well, let's take you now to our correspondent Ehsan Kavani in Tehran. Ehsan, what is Tehran saying about the possibility of another Israeli attack?
Well, today, Iran's Hossein Amir-Abdollahian had a telephone conversation with his Chinese counterpart, Foreign Minister Wang Yi. The Chinese minister tried to convince Iran to show restraint. Iran today said that it is not willing to help escalate the tension in the region. Meanwhile, Deputy Foreign Minister for Political Affairs Ali Bagheri appeared on national television on Monday, and he said Israel's April 1st attack against the Iranian consular section in Damascus provided the necessary legitimacy for Iran to seriously test its military capabilities. He then warned Israel that in case of, quote, repeating the mistake, they will receive a harder, faster, and more urgent blow, adding that in that case, Tel Aviv should not count in hours, but in seconds. President Ebrahim Raisi also warned that the tiniest hostile move against Iran's interests will trigger a fierce, massive, and painful response to all perpetrators. It seems that while Israel has not yet come to a final conclusion about response to Iran, there is a war of words, especially from Iran. Here, almost all the politicians and military people are strongly warning Israel. We had the strongest forms of threatening adjectives coming from the head of judiciary, parliament speaker, MPs, ministers, and all the IRGC and army commanders, apart from the president and foreign ministry. Jamie.
What could the impact be of more Western sanctions on Iran's economy?
Well, realistically speaking, there would not be a big change for Iran, even if more and more sanctions are imposed. It has been years that Iran has no access to international banking system, and naturally trading with the world is officially impossible. Iran currently depends on China for imports. Exporting oil is being done through unofficial channels, and the country is tolerating the costs of sanctions. So fresh sanctions are basically not really meaningful in Iran's current economy, at least. Back to you.
Ehsan Kavani, our correspondent in Tehran, thank you very much. You're watching CGTN. Still ahead, the journey from Greece to France. The flame for the Paris Olympics is lit in Olympia, the ancient home of the Games.
Ever wondered what's the difference between a bear and a bull market? Where are the cash cows? And who are the lame ducks? And what exactly are black swans? Grey rhinos? And unicorn companies? Make sense of it all with global business, only on CGTN.
I think it should be more global cooperation.
I would like to hear more the voice of the developing countries.
Globalization has lifted more than 1 billion people out of poverty.
The green transition has to happen. It's a necessity.
For China and the United States are important powers in the world.
What unites us is much more than what divides us. And I believe China is committed to this agenda.
Join me, Juliet Mann, to set the agenda at these times every weekend on CGTN.
Events have consequences. Words create impact.
One more offensive in a long line of battles that's been ongoing for more...
Just got to be careful here with some gunshots. Excuse us.
The world today matters for your world tomorrow.
The number of casualties is growing quickly.
This is one of the hardest hit towns in the region.
The world today, every day on CGTN.
Hello, welcome back. A reminder of our top stories. China's President Xi Jinping says cooperation between Beijing and Berlin is an opportunity, not a risk, as he holds talks with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Our other headlines: Israel's war cabinet convenes for a third time to discuss its response to Iran's drone and missile attack. And health officials in Gaza say dozens of Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes in the last 24 hours. The flame for the Paris Olympics has been lit in Olympia, the historic home of the Games. In a traditional ceremony, the torch was lit in front of the ruins of the Temple of Hera by an actress playing the part of a high priestess. This marks the start of the torch relay, and the flame goes on a 17,000-kilometre journey from Greece to the French capital in time for the opening ceremony in July. From ancient Olympia, the Olympic torch will travel across Greece in an 11-day relay, ending in Athens. There, the Olympic flame will be handed over to the Paris organisers in a ceremony at the site of the first modern Olympic Games in 1896. On the 27th of April, the flame begins its journey to France. It'll travel on board the Belém, France's last 19th century trading ship that is still sailing. The flame is set to arrive in France on the 18th of May in Marseille, with many high-profile guests expected to attend. From Marseille, the flame will start its journey across France with 10,000 torchbearers carrying it through 64 territories. And that includes, by the way, a relay across the oceans, where it'll touch down in 6 of France's overseas territories before returning to Nice on the 18th of June. Well, 23rd of June is Olympic Day, which celebrates the founding of the modern games, and the torch will be in Chamonix in the French Alps, where France hosted the first Winter Olympics 100 years ago. It first arrives in Paris on the 14th of July to mark Bastille Day, France's national day. And it'll return to the French capital on the 26th of July to light the Olympic cauldron during the opening ceremony. Well, our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas is in Olympia for us. Evangelo, this really does sound quite the epic journey.
It is indeed an epic journey, and the ceremony today was even more epic, I could say. It was thousands of spectators from around the world packed the stadium, the ancient stadium here in Olympia, to see this magnificent ceremony that has been taking place since 776 BC. Thousands of people from around the world, a lot of French people, of course, being a little bit more touched by the ceremony because the flame will be arriving in France in the Olympic Games there. But I have to admit, though, there was a little bit of disappointment today because there are cloud skies. It was a cloudy day today, and unfortunately, the priestess that called upon God Apollo, she didn't say, "God Apollo, send the relay, send your light for the flame to be lit." She said that thank you for sending that, meaning that the flame was already here because the ceremony, the traditional way, it couldn't have taken place. Now, that flame was then carried to the stadium where the first torchbearer, the Olympic gold medalist in Tokyo, Stefanos Douskos, carried it outside before giving it to a counterpart of his from France. Now, as you mentioned, it's going to travel thousands of kilometers, and here in Greece, it's going to spend about 5,000 kilometers all across the country before arriving in the Panathinaikos Stadium on the 26th of April, where the French delegation will take it to the port of Piraeus and then travel to the port city of Marseille.
It really is a lifetime experience to carry the Olympic torch, and I know you've been talking to the first torch bearer.
Yeah, well, we could see it in his face when he was carrying the flame, how touched he was about it, how impact it made to him. It almost like he was crying while he was running with the flame in his hands. We spoke to him, and we can hear it in his voice with a kind of a squeaky from excitement, but also the feelings that he was going through. He mentioned to us that it's unimaginable to understand how someone can carry the flame, and if you haven't carried it, then it's difficult to feel that. Let's have a listen.
I don't know what to say. It's a unique thing. It's like carrying all the Greeks with you. It's like having the weight of your country and all the athletes on your shoulders. So everybody, the whole generation that has passed, all of them, it's like you're carrying on something and you're carrying on the tradition. So it's something great, something significant, especially for sports. And it's something that only those who can hold the torch, even for a little bit, can feel.
And it was quite a similar image from other athletes that carried the Olympic flame after the gold medalist here in Greece, the Greek gold medalist, but also the vice president of the European Commission, Mr. Skinas, carried it. And here in the ceremony, the head of the Olympic Committee was here, Mr. Bach, which the message from all of them was pretty much saying that what needs to be done is the historic site of Olympia, which decree of truce was signed. Let's see that will happen this time around with what is going on in the world. And let's hope that the Olympic flame in Paris will actually mark a ceasefire.
Evangelo, thank you for that. Our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas in Olympia. Croatia's parliamentary elections take place on Wednesday, with two main political parties fighting to win a majority. The ruling Croatian Democratic Union, or HDZ, is taking on the Social Democratic Party. Our correspondent Alyosha Milenkovic reports.
At Zagreb's famous Kvartić market, the Social Democratic Party leadership decided to stage one of its last public appearances before the parliamentary elections. Their leader, Peđa Grbin, spoke with the people there and addressed the journalists while carefully avoiding a difficult topic: a controversy surrounding President Zoran Milanovic's announcement from a few weeks ago that he'll run for the Prime Minister seat on the SDP list. It was a move that shook Croatia and triggered the Constitutional Court to block the president from running for Prime Minister, campaign for an opposition party, or take part in the upcoming elections unless he quits from his current position. And not just that. The court issued a gag order to the SDP, forbidding them to publicly use the president's name during the campaign.
So, as you know, Constitutional Court of Croatia has made a decision that doesn't put me in position to comment on any actions of the President of the Republic. Basically, we are condemned to be quiet about his activities. We are not at liberty to say pretty much anything.
The day after, the ruling party, Croatian Democratic Union, or HDZ, had a rally at one of Zagreb's central city squares. Prime Minister Andrej Plenković addressed the supporters, reminding them of their achievements in the past 2 mandates and how long they have been running the country. And he also expressed optimism about the upcoming election results.
I just got a message that all 3 election opinion polls came out, and all 3 project that we'll have 60 seats from the votes in Croatia, 3 from the diaspora, and that's 63. We need just 5 more, so nobody else could demand anything from us after the elections.
Yet the analysts here point at so many strange things surrounding these elections. From the fact that for the first time in the country's history, elections are scheduled in the middle of the week, to the mixed messages regarding the political orientations.
An additional controversy is that it's become evident that the head of the right-wing party is more liberal and left-wing orientated than the candidate for the left-centre, Zoran Milanovic, who is more right-wing and nationalistic. This is a comedy of confusion. Andrej Plenković would fit far better as the head of the SDP at the top of the HDZ.
Although this might seem like a 2-horse race, analysts do not exclude the possibility of more surprises when the results come in. Many here label Wednesday's election as one of the most controversial in Croatia's recent history, but all agree that neither of the sides can win an absolute majority and that some sort of coalition will be inevitable. Aljoša Milenković, CGTN, Zagreb.
Around 100 people are believed to have died after heavy monsoon rain hit Afghanistan and Pakistan, with both countries reporting around 50 deaths each. Homes, infrastructure and crops have been destroyed. The authorities in the region are on high alert, with more bad weather expected this week. And at least 18 people have died in Oman after heavy rain and flash flooding there battered parts of the Gulf. 9 school children and their driver were killed as their vehicle was swept away. Rescue teams are still searching for 2 others. The extreme weather also caused travel disruption in the UAE, with major highways flooded in Dubai and some international flights affected. A fire has engulfed the historic old stock exchange building in the Danish capital, Copenhagen. The structure, which was undergoing renovation, was clad in scaffolding, making it more difficult for the emergency services. A spire on the roof collapsed due to the intense heat. The police say there are no reports of injuries. The headlines again. China's President Xi Jinping has said cooperation between Beijing and Berlin is an opportunity, not a risk, as he held talks with the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. Our other headlines: Israel's war cabinet is meeting for a 3rd time to discuss its response to Iran's drone and missile attack. And health officials in Gaza say dozens of Palestinians have been killed in Israeli strikes in the last 24 hours. And that is the world today. Thank you for watching. There's more news on CGTN Europe's channel on the Telegram app, or scan the QR code on the screen to get stories and updates sent direct to your phone. We're back with more news at the top of this hour. Coming up next, it's World Insight. For now, from all of the team in London, it's goodbye.